And welcome to those of you who are here to listen in and participate as well. We have about 20 folks here on the call. So again, thanks to everyone and good morning. I am, again, grateful to have Allison and Erica with us from CMS. I want to start by, I still have to keep admitting people. Let me change one of this settings here so they can just get on the call. Hopefully that helps. So reminder to those of you in the audience before I forget this part, if you have something you want to ask, please type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute your mic if you want to ask it yourself. The goal today, I think, is really just a check-in. I think what we will learn from this conversation is that there are still changes perhaps happening. There are still things that, you know, that the situation is likely to evolve, is the best way to say that, as with all of this craziness that we've all been experiencing. And, you know, I was just on the phone or chatting with Erica for a minute before we got started here today. And I think what we all know about this college process and high school in general is that it can be riddled with anxiety in the best of times, and let alone adding this pandemic on top of it certainly makes it more stressful. And just with uncertainty about anything comes a lot of that. So, you know, I think what I want to share is a message I've been sharing on these calls is that this is a time when, yes, it's uncertain, but yes, I trust that colleges are going to figure out how to still evaluate students with the information, no matter how limited or how changed it may end up being in the long run. And we've already had talks a lot about the test scores changing or being optional at least. We're talking about AP exams changing. Lots of things are changing, but the colleges are also going to adapt to that. And later in the conversation, I'll share with you some information I surveyed a few more friends in college admissions about their thoughts specifically on grading and how that is impacting students and how it will impact their process. But again, I trust that if anything, they will look at the context and they are going to ask students questions, and they are going to try their best to understand what the situation was in any given school district. And obviously CMS as a whole will, that will be part of that. So just want to keep those parts in mind and just kind of remind everybody to take a deep breath if we can. So a couple of things. Obviously, we know that a statement has come out about how students will have options and what they can choose in terms of their grades, in terms of choosing pass, fail, or having graded work still for the rest of the year. My advice to those who I've talked to individually so far has been, keep working, keep doing your best. That's always what colleges will want to see. But every individual student may have separate questions that they need to address, you know, individually. And it may come down to individual class questions even. But right now, my bottom line advice is to just keep at it. This is still important work. For some of you, you are in classes that are going to build on one another. So if you stop doing your work in Spanish 1 and have this huge break between now and the time you start Spanish 2, there might be a lag, and you don't want to play catch up in terms of that. Same with math, same with some other subjects. So in general, I think it's just best to kind of keep going. I'm trying to convince my own 9th grader of that on a daily basis, and he doesn't have a choice right now, but he's reluctant at times, to say the least. He would like for this all to just be over and check off the to-do list. But so hang in there with your kids. I know it's where some of them are getting tired of this new model and being at home and managing it this way. You know, the other part to think about is when students are applying to colleges and they need recommendation letters, if they have shown their best effort under these circumstances, that may end up being a great teacher recommendation that we, you know, wouldn't have thought of necessarily in, you know, earlier weeks. But that may turn out to be the best situation where somebody can really talk about how they were, you know, persistent and did their best work and kept up with it through all of these unusual circumstances. So that's something to think about as well in terms of the encouragement that we give to students in terms of just keeping it all going. So let's start with a few of the sort of questions that I have. I have been fortunate to speak to a couple of school counselors as well ahead of this so that I could get some feedback from them in terms of sorry, I'm getting a text for somebody who still can't connect. Let me send her the link as I chat for a quick second. But I think that, again, what I'm hearing from everyone seems to be that we want to do what's best for the students. So the options that they've been given are designed to give them the best possible outcomes. Erica, Allison, do you agree with that? I mean, do you think I'm on track when I say that? To me, that's my interpretation, that everybody is trying to do what's best for the students in the long run.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. I will say good morning, everyone. I will say that I know that this is a time of anxiety for everyone, and it's very stressful. So I understand that. But I will say that as we continue to hear the rapid changes that are happening are because we're looking into the best options for students, in ensuring that the student outcomes are that every student has the opportunity to be successful no matter the circumstances. And so it sounds like a lot of information, and information is changing constantly, but I will say that that is one of the things that I know for certain, is that as the information is pushed out, there is lots of conversation around how best to accommodate every single student, so that every student is successful.
Great, thank you. I agree with that. Well, a couple of things. One of the counselors that I spoke to, one of the big questions that I have been asked directly a lot of times has just been, what is this all going to look like in the end? Like, basically, what is a transcript even going to look like in the end? And so let me share some of the things that I've been told, and Allison and Erica, please correct me if I'm misspeaking in any way, or if that has changed since a week ago when I got the information. But, in a typical year, for a year-long class, for example, obviously you calculate a year-end grade. This year, it sounds like there will likely be a first semester grade and a second semester grade, given the circumstances that we're in now. I see nodding. So again, that, as of today, that is the information I have, and the information that I know has been a question that some of the families have asked me. So I wanted to share that right up front.
Yeah, because they actually showed us a sample of what a transcript would look like in a data manager meeting yesterday. And you literally do, like, if you take AP Art History, you now see 2 lines for AP Art History. And if it was an A first semester and a B second semester, then you're going to see the quality points applied for the first half of it and the quality of points applied for the second half of it, or the weighted value applied to each and stuff. So you are going to see 2 different lines for each of them.
Okay. Yeah, so that will obviously be different too. And I know, most of the students that I've been working with, nobody was failing anything first semester, but I know that can be certainly an issue for these year-long classes too. If now it's a semester grade, if they're not earning a full credit in the long run, that could cause some problems, it sounded like, for some
Yeah,
students.
that's a great example. So like a student who is taking AP language, if they have a passing grade for first semester and they get that 0.5 credit, but they do not have a passing grade for quarter 3, and they don't do what is needed to get that up to a passing grade, they now have a 0.5 for AP language, but you have to have a full credit for English 3, and CMS does not teach courses in half credits. So that student will end up having to repeat the entire course in order to get a course that they need in order to graduate.
Got it. That makes complete sense. So thank you, because that was a huge question just about how this would look on the transcript. And that leads into a little bit about third quarter. So one point of clarification is, I think there is a distinction between the grade you had on March 13th, that was not actually the end of third quarter. Am I right? Or is that, because that seems to have been some confusion among my families, and something I'm not 100% sure about in terms of that. So March 13th, when classes ended, you had a grade, but you still had some work to do for it to be the end of third quarter. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. And teachers were advised to continue to collect anything that a student owed them for the end of quarter 3, and to put that into the grade book. So although they keep using the terminology as of March 13th, they're actually using the quarter 3 grade.
Yes.
And even though it's not something that's being advertised, because teachers are not going to just start randomly opening grade books or anything. If there's a student who had an extenuating circumstance at the very end of quarter 3, when we all went out, medical or whatever, then that student just needs to reach out to the teacher and
Right.
work something out for that last little bit of information that they owe for quarter three. Because you are correct, as of March 13th and quarter three are being used basically as synonyms of each other.
Right, okay, that makes more sense than, yes, because that was a little bit confusing to me in terms of that. Okay, and then so if a student then, so right now they know where they ended third quarter, essentially. And so if they are continuing to do their work, then it should only be helping them in the process, correct? And then, but some of them have indicated, not very many of mine, I think, but many have said, I'm not going to do any, I don't have to do the work. I had an A, I feel good about where I was, and they're stopping. And that is okay, correct? If that's, even though that's not what my best advice is.
Not our best advice.
Okay. We're on the same page with that.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. And I think you were very correct in your assessment of, you want to put your best foot forward. And so as you're looking forward to teacher recommendations and you're looking forward to keeping lines of communication open with your teachers, right? That is the image that you want to portray. But also, like you mentioned, I think it's really important to say that school's going to continue. And so the information that you don't necessarily get, you're still going to need for the next year. So it behooves a student to continue to do the work because that information gap still has to be filled.
that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. So, so the next question that sort of ties into, again, students, they always want to know the easy way out in a lot of cases, but what if they chose not to do any more work, then the follow-up question I get is, but are the colleges going to know that? So in other words, is there an indication on that transcript now of how that grade is reported for this now second semester, which we've identified as a separate line? Is there going to be some type of asterisk of this was third quarter grades only, or this represents a full semester worth of work? Is that, and you all may not know the answer to that at this point, but is there going to be any type of indication with that?
So go ahead, Erica.
I was going to say, as of right now, quarter four is currently taking place with grades.
Okay.
And so those grades will be figured into a semester grade for a semester class. The year-long, and same thing with the year-long classes, although that conversation is still evolving as we speak about what that looks like. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Allison, but.
No, actually, we did get notification today that a lot of the information that was released on Friday about grades 9-11 is being revisited one more time. And so right now we need to just consider that a little bit of a fluid document that was released. Now, I will say to the question that you again articulated it very well, that we want students to continue working. That is in students' best interest to continue working and things, but questions that we always get are things like what you said of, do schools see quarters along the way and things like that? No, universities see the final grade that was stored for each one. So in this particular case, unless something changes with what's coming out, you're still only going to see one line that is stored for first semester and one line that is stored for second semester. You don't see everything that's happening in between, just like when students always ask, do my incident reports always get put on the transcript? No incident reports get put on a transcript. It's literally what the grade was. And that's why when seniors are applying for colleges, you only see what they are taking. You never, when they're in year-long classes, get to see grades along the way. You instead have to send a quick lookup screen if the school wants to know what their grades are currently like at this point.
Right. That makes sense. Well, great. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a question. Hi, I'm sorry.
Welcome.
Hi, sorry, a little late to the party here, and you may have already covered this. You mentioned that the document is fluid and it's going to be revisited. Is this the directive from the State Department that says students have the option of taking whatever their average was as of March 13th? Or continuing to improve on that average or take pass fail? Is that what's being revisited?
So a lot of that, so the directives that were issued are still in place as of now. The conversations really are around how to implement them equitably. And so there was a conversation that Kim and I were having earlier about, schools having sort of the ability to manage this process themselves. It really is more of a district piece, because CMS has been very clear that they want that process to be as clear as possible and as concise as possible, but consistent. And so, that's the language even that they're using, is that the consistency of how it gets implemented across schools is really going to be key in terms of making sure that we provide equitable access for every student, which then affects what happens next.
So theoretically, say a student had Spanish 4, 98, March 13th, and says, that's the grade I want to be on, to be factored into my final grade. Is that then an option for that student?
As of today, that's the option, yes.
Unless they're a senior. Unless they're a
Yeah,
senior.
well, no, this is a directive for grades 9, 11.
Correct. Yeah,
Correct.
we do have some families, like I still have families reaching out to me, letting me know that they want their senior to be able to take the numerical grade for semester 2 rather than the pass or withdrawal. And I keep trying to explain that's not an option for a senior.
That's not an option.
Right.
No, yeah. No, I meant for grades 9, 11. No, I know it's not an option for seniors, definitely. And then I guess the other question that comes in, so if a student says, that's what I want to do, I want that to be my final grade, are there going to be final exams?
There are no exams.
No exams.
They have canceled all exams.
Okay.
But there are AP exams.
I just didn't know if that had been covered before I belatedly hopped on here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phyllis.
Thank you.
Another question that actually somebody just put in the chat, are the grades on the transcript going to be numerical, or will they also be letter grades for this in this modified first semester, then a second semester look at those grades?
The sample that they showed us shows numerical grades. So you're either going to see a numerical grade, you're going to see a PC 19, or the WWC 19 on there. And again, the numerical will even go so far as to reflect if the first semester was an A and the second semester was a B, that you'll see on there a 99 and how it would be weighted, and then the 88 and how it would be weighted. The part that's going to be kind of throw some people for a loop is like, again, going back to the weighting of a course, the first semester is only a 0.5 credit, so the weighting is only going to appear as a 2.5 if they made an A. Versus the 5.0 that you would normally see. So some people are probably going to get thrown for a loop and think that they're not getting the weight that they're supposed to, but a 2.5 at a 0.5 is the same thing as a 5.0 at a 1.0.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, that would have been that. You're right. That would have been another point of red flag moment when that came up. In terms of just, and this is a bigger level question, I think, about how this is going to be communicated from your school's counselors in to the colleges. Basically, how are they going to help students contextualize this in this process? I mean, students will have some control over that. They have the opportunity on their applications to do a good bit of that as well, even at any grade level. I mean, even if you have a sophomore and you're listening in today and this is a blip for them, they may still be contextualizing this when they're applying down the road. But as a school, in either case, have you all talked about that yet? Or is that a district level decision? I'd love input or insight on that as well.
I'll take that, Allison.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to begin?
Okay. I know that, I mean, truth be told, like, this is really an international issue, because it's going to come from every different, space in the world, that colleges are going to have this conversation. And so Ours is really starting at the state level, those conversations for how to make it consistent at the state level, and then pushing it down to the districts. And then the districts are, as of right now, we don't have a whole lot of conversation happening about what that looks like at the school level. I'm waiting for some direction from the district in terms of that happening, but I'm sure there will be some flexibility as it pushes down to the schools. But I mean, truthfully, this will be a conversation that colleges have to have, from an international space, for international students, down to local students attending North Carolina universities, colleges and universities.
I know that I had recently listened to one of the DPI webinars, and they were making it perfectly clear in those webinars that communication is happening. Like when decisions are being made, they're not being made in isolation. They're talking to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. They're talking to universities, even right down to APs, the way that APs are being given and things like that, to make sure that that's not going to be a detriment to students. At our particular school, the one thing that continually reoccurs is the fact that private schools got to continue learning. And a lot of the students at our particular school go up against private school students in our area for particular schools of interest here in North Carolina. And so that is one of the reasons that a large group of people like PTSO representatives from our school reached out to the state and really pushed this whole, please give us the option of a semester 2 numerical grade so that we could have transcripts that reflect our students learning the same way that a private school would have theirs reflected. But I do think ultimately there's not, I can't say that if you're applying for one in another country or something, that there's not going to be some differences in the way that it was handled in their districts or whatever versus the way that ours did. But I can't imagine that you're going to apply anywhere here in the United States and people are not going to be aware of why a transcript looks the way that it does. Right. Even with the PC-19, there was worries that it would affect athletic eligibility, but that's not even going to be an issue at this particular point. So that's, I mean, that all of that I think is being considered very carefully before any decisions are being made.
Great, thank you. I got some questions in the chat, so let me share and see if we can address them. Some of them kind of grouped together. So, so the grades that are in Power School or Canvas, depending on what you're calling it these days, as of March 13th, those are now third quarter grades. Is that true, or is it the case that those may not be completely up to date even for third quarter grades? That's one of the questions.
So, I mean, I can only speak for CMS, and so we were not allowed from the district to put grades into Power School for that period from April 1st through April 30th. And so Canvas was collecting grades as students were doing work, but teachers were allowed to give feedback and not to actually give grades for that work. So the grades that are reflected in Power School for quarter 3 are accurate for quarter 3 based on March 13th.
Okay.
And then quarter 4, so like if you're looking at Power School, that grade for quarter 3 is the quarter 3 grade.
Okay.
Right. And then there's
across the district at this point.
Correct. And that's the conversation that's happening at the district level, is how to then move forward, putting grades into Power School for both year-long classes and semester classes for quarter 4, since we know quarter 4 will be new learning through the remote learning process.
Right. Okay. And I guess the follow-up to that, and 2 people have asked this basically, is do we, and this may be, and I don't know because y'all are still getting information too, but do we have any sense of when that will happen? In other words, students are wondering too, when will they know how well they've been doing in order to decide what grade they want to choose to report. Again, what makes us look the best, which is what we want for them, obviously, but they've got to know how they've been doing, obviously, at this point with grades to make that choice. any sense of when they'll know that?
So my understanding is a memo is going to come out to principals on May 11th. Now that was originally communicated. I don't know if that's going to change based on the information we just got, but a memo is going to come out to principals on May 11th that will be basically something that will be a communication to families. Unless something changes, though, families are not going to make their decision until June 1. So they want us to wait all the way until June 1 before you start talking with a teacher about whether you want the P or you want the numerical grade. Now that is for second semester. Obviously for first semester, that's not something where the student weighs in and says which one they want. That's just on the teacher to do those calculations correctly. But for semester 2, June 1st, and there will actually be a place in Power School where the teacher, again, all of this is unless it changes, where the teacher will actually make a note of whether they're entering that because they were told that by the family, like they have reached the family and the family has made this decision, or whether they're entering it temporarily because they have not been able to reach the family at this point. And that for families that they cannot reach, to get them to make the decision on numerical versus pass, those families will be contacted in the fall of next year.
Wow.
And given a chance to make that decision.
Okay. Thank you. So a couple of clarifying questions. This takes us back a little bit to Allison, what you were talking about with the grading so if I have a student who had an 89 first semester, and that is a weighted class, you already mentioned, then there's 0.25 weight added on that. Then they get a 92 or 93 in second semester. In other words, they're not, it's basically let's see, how does this work? How was the question? You don't get full quality points for an A is what the question boils down to. Does that make sense? So
correct, because you're only getting a 0.5 credit for it at that particular point. So you're getting half of what the weighted value would be, because when you go back and you calculate everything in and you divide by the total number of credits, that it comes back to work the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I, just as context for everyone, I used to work in a school where we reported semester grades like you saw, if you had that B first semester and made an A by second semester, but it's still, the overall calculation would come out to be like you're describing, Allison, but it's just, it would just show. And then, in that case, we would just tell the students, well, it shows that you improved. You had a great year and you got better. But I understand why these questions come up, because you don't always see the first semester separately like this.
Well, and Erica probably has experienced this too. We have a lot of kids who will move to us, move into Charlotte from out of state somewhere, and they will come in with 0.5 credits and different things, and we have to apply that to the transcript. But if our kids actually leave and go someplace else and they're halfway done with the course, they don't go out with a 0.5, because we just don't deal with 0.5s. At least not in our district. I can't speak for other districts, but in our district, you can't get awarded a half credit. This is an exception at this particular time.
All right. So another question is then, if in some classes, if grades go down because they're not, either the instruction is not going well, it's not a good environment for the student. If their grade goes down Q4, can they still then opt to just stick with the grade, the Q3 grade for the second semester grade with no penalty? Is that correct? That's clarification we're getting asked.
As it reads right now, yes. Unless we find out anything differently in what's being communicated to us, yes, that would be the case.
Okay. What about, again, the process is clear for this particular mom in year-long classes, but in semester-long 4x4 classes, which I know you have at Myers Park, is the process the same? Can the student choose either the grade as of the end of third quarter, which was just essentially the first half of the class, or the end of the year, whichever is highest?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Again, what happens in fourth quarter can only help a student at this particular point unless we get any directives otherwise. So it cannot hinder the student in any way.
Right. Correct.
And in my opinion, that's also another great reason to even be on board with continuing the work, not only because you're bridging to your next classes, but we don't know at this point if we're going to start out the beginning of next year online too, and taking advantage of this opportunity to learn how to do online and things like that could be very helpful if this is the start of the fall again as well.
Right. I think, yes, we're all learning as we go here, that's for sure. So the next two questions relate to pass-fail. So if a student chooses the pass-fail option, how does that impact their GPA? And then the specific follow-up question is, does it hurt to take a pass versus numerical grade for an AP course? I have thoughts too, but what might you all say?
So first off, there is no pass-fail, just to clarify that part of it. There's a pass or a withdrawal.
Right.
No child can get a fail in a course, just to clarify. And Erica, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I
you're
think
good.
you were getting ready to say
That's
something.
good. Language clarification, you're right. We do need
Yes.
to avoid that.
No, that was what I was going to say. And so the PC19 or the WC19 are not pass fail, they're pass withdrawal, and they do not calculate it into the GPA. So that's not going to happen with either two of those options. If a child chooses the numerical grade, that is what calculates into the GPA, and that's the only point at which it will.
Okay.
And then back to your question about the AP, you know, that's a hard one. That's a choice the person has to make. I would definitely not want to advise anybody on what is best in that situation. Because you're right, it's a matter of how it's going to affect the GPA and what are their other grades like and things like that really should be factored into making that decision.
Yeah. And I feel like that's one that's, like so much in this process, is very individualized too. I think that really, you need to look at the context of the student's overall transcript. What grade are we talking about? If we're talking about taking a B in an AP class, in these circumstances, that's probably what I would advise you to do if it were, you know, if I was looking at it in the whole context of things. But again, I think that's one of those that falls under, it might need to be an individual conversation with a counselor to figure that out, just to be sure. So let's see. Lots of questions. We may not get through all of these, but we'll keep going. In reference to third quarter grades, some turned in work after 313 up until 326 to be completed, or to be included, I'm sorry. Does that work count into third quarter grades? Because again, we were sort of using third quarter and 313 interchangeably, but that sort of lengthens it past that date.
Correct. And so, sorry, Allison. And so one of the things that the district was very clear about was that through this process of remote learning, no students will be held harmless. No student will be hurt by any of the decisions that are made as it pertains to grades. And so any student that turned in work that could potentially help their grade, then those grades are reflected in that final grade for Q3.
Great. Well, and this one is just and I don't even think I did this properly at the beginning, but somebody came in late and just wanted to reintroduce our speakers, and we didn't actually even do that properly because we just jumped right in this morning. So Erica and Allison, would you mind saying who you are and what school you're with and your role at the school?
Absolutely. My name is Erica Gibson, and I am the assistant principal for instruction at South Mecklenburg High School.
And I'm Allison Davis, and I'm the assistant principal of instruction at Myers Park High School.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, this well, this one is probably nothing that you can really respond to yet, but let's throw it out there anyway. Changing gears just a little bit, since we've touched on what fall might look like. Do you have any sense of that? Any idea about reopening plans? CMS talking about speculating just yet? That's kind of off topic, but we're all curious, I think, about what, if you know anything.
I know nothing.
I know nothing.
As long as that's the answer, then we know we've still got to wait on that. And you know, certainly that's what we're hearing at a lot of colleges. They are starting to roll out plans more and more, but I think, you know, I also, many of you on the call know I have a husband who works in education, who runs a school, and it's still very much up in the, I mean, I feel like we don't even know what's happening 2 weeks from now on a
Right.
regular basis right now. So I suspect we've got a little ways to go in terms of that. So, okay, back to grading then. So let's see, a teacher, this may have already been answered, but a teacher enters grades after March 13th, then pulls them out of Power School. Will they put them back in? My hunch is that was done because they're giving the student the best possible grade overall, but I'm not sure.
So I'll give you a scenario that happened at our school. And again, I would say that this would be something that I recommend that you reach out to the teacher and talk with the teacher about it. So we did communicate per what was provided to us from the district that if you had already assigned some things, then, and students had already started turning them in, that you could continue to accept those things. We had a teacher who misinterpreted that and thought because she had already told the kids there would be a quiz coming up over the next week that she could go ahead and still give that quiz. And what ended up happening was some took the quiz, some did not take the quiz, then zeros were going in for the kids who didn't take it in things because she thought in her mind she was doing what she was supposed to, and that was, I told them they were going to have a quiz, so I'm going to give them the quiz. So we had to ask her to back that quiz back out again. Now, what that unfortunately means is there may have been a couple of kids who did really well on it and wanted that grade, but that was not the intent behind it. Was that you could finish out a syllabus, you know, everything that you had in the syllabus for Q3, you could go ahead and run that out, kind of a situation. So again, I've been encouraging parents who reach out to me about situations like that to, if they feel comfortable, reach out to the teacher. If they don't feel comfortable, I'll usually just reach out to the teacher and ask in general on their behalf, and then get back with them and let them know about it, because that's a case again where technically kids were being penalized for what was happening, instead of it being more about, I've already given these assignments out and I'm continuing to collect things so kids don't get zeros for things that are already in Power School.
Okay, got it. All right, Allison, I'm mindful of your time, and we're going to ask one more question to clarify GPA, and then when you do have to go, I think we'll turn our attention to my wrap up about what colleges are saying at current state of colleges. But so let's see, this new info about calculating. Okay, so again, GPA based separately, calculated based separately on a first semester grade and a second semester grade. So again, lots of students out there who count on they've been working hard and they're hoping that year-end final grade is what, you know, in a normal year, that is what would be on the transcript. And so they've had that B first semester perhaps, or maybe even a C, and now they've been working much harder. They're feeling like this calculation will penalize them in this new scenario because there's two separate semester grades. But all it is doing at this point is, I mean, they'll still be averaged together in the grand scheme of things in a cumulative GPA.
So I'm not sure if maybe this particular person who put the question in there is thinking in terms of, you know, my child made a C all of first semester. We were really dependent upon doing really well third quarter and fourth quarter, making all A's, so that the C and the A together can kind of come together and end up being for a B across the year or whatever. I mean, technically, yes, are you going to end up seeing a C first semester and then you're going to end up seeing an A second semester, and you're not going to get to see that one solid B that's there possibly? That is possibly the case, but as a college, I would think that I would look at the fact that the student clearly not only improved their grade across the time, but demonstrated by the end of the course that they had mastered the content. I mean, that would be my thoughts around that. I don't know Erica's thoughts about that.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think that there's some advantage to that going, and I'm going to take it all the way back to what you were talking about, just in terms of showing grit and perseverance during this time period that we know is difficult. Like that is shown on a transcript without words. And so as much as you can tell the story without having to write the story, you know, though that's, I think, what is going to be the most significant in terms of how colleges start to look at and review transcripts during, you know, moving forward, at least for the next few years.
Sure. And
And I
even
know what I experienced. I had a my one child who just graduated from Myers Park is a freshman now. What I experienced with him that was totally different from my other son who just graduated from college is he had to write multiple essays. And what I mean by that is you didn't have just one story to tell. There was like all these different prompts, even for one college, that you were having to write all of these essays for. And what you didn't want to do was appear that you only had one story to tell and they were just being retold in all these different essays. And I think that Erica makes a great point about the fact that a student who perseveres all the way through this, they had a C first semester, they have an A second semester, it's on their transcript, that becomes a whole story to tell in one of your essays about how, you know, in the midst of all of this, could have been a huge challenge for you as a student, but you stepped up and you figured it out and you turned it into a successful situation. And even what happens next year as a result of that, you go into another course, you know, very prepared for the course as a result of the decision that you made.
That's true.
And even Allison, can I ask a quick, just one quick question? Do you anticipate that Charlotte Mecklenburg will have some type of consistent or explanation that will appear on all transcripts so that colleges will have an understanding of how grading procedures were handled? I know you both have great school profiles and that can address it as well, but do you think there'll be standardized explanation that every family can kind of feel some comfort that every transcript is going to have this consistent message on it?
That's a great question. I don't know. I know that there is this use of the 19 that's being done in there. So even I read something on there where one of the grades is being stored as like a C19 or something like that, but then I think it gets turned into a semester one. A transcript comes straight out of Power School. So the only way that that would happen is if the state put some kind of message on every single person's transcript. But I do think you make a good point as far as I feel very strongly. We have a counseling team of 9 that is very good. I feel very strongly that they will get together as a team and come up with some kind of communication that is consistent among all of them, because that's just generally the way that they operate. And then that would be something that could be pushed out for every single child, but that would be part of their own letter as a counselor. I don't know that it would show up on like a transcript unless the state made that decision. Yeah. Thoughts on that, Erica?
No, I agree. I think because we have a counseling team of 10 and our counselors get together, and any kind of communication like that we know is going to go out to our colleges and universities comes, you know, as one specific statement that they've all crafted. I do feel though that because we're in this boat where colleges are in the same position, that they're going to be looking for statements across the board from every state, from every district, in terms of how do we then regulate and really standardize the process again through the college admissions process so that it's fair for every student. And those statements have to come because a college won't necessarily know what this state says versus what that state says, and how it's then accumulated on a transcript.
Sure. Great point. Allison, I'm still mindful of time. If you need to excuse yourself, we completely understand.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I'm sure our families appreciate your insight, and you may hear from a few who follow up with you with specific questions, but I appreciate your insight, and you know, we're all in this together. Everybody hang in there, right? So,
thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And we'll keep going through a little bit else here. Erica, if you don't mind, this one other quick question, and
sure.
Then we'll talk about college related stuff. But the question is, was Q3 changed to end early? Originally, the statement from CMS was that like spring break was starting with the lockdown. I do remember that when there was some changes with that. Then it's been a little bit difficult for some families to know which grades were Q3 and which were not. And during some stressful times, obviously.
So
Q3 end earlier?
So one of the things that I think it's really helpful for parents to know is that that none of the schools nor the district can do anything without the state assembly. And so although the the quarter technically changed and spring break changed, then all of those things had to be voted on again and undone. So it's not as simple as just changing the dates, because the dates are set by number of seat hours that a student must have per quarter based on the number of days per year. And that's all technical jargon, but those decisions are made at the General Assembly level. So we don't even have the ability to make those adjustments just because. So the quarter end date was always going to be the quarter end date, regardless of the March 13th leave date, which is why students had the opportunity to then continue to do the work and have grades captured through the end of March. So the quarter ended on March 30th, I believe, that as originally scheduled.
Okay.
I don't know if that's helpful, but that's the answer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, again, as we all know, a lot of this, as I said in the intro, is that, you know, part of what makes us all anxious is how is this going to impact colleges? And my friend and colleague Phyllis Gill has been helping me. We've contacted several different colleges to get their feedback. And so I'm going to actually ask Phyllis to share with the group what she learned from the folks that she was able to talk to, and then I'll share a bit that I've researched as well. Phyllis, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kim. Here I am again. So I reached out to just a variety of college admissions folks, both state university and private institutions. And I think as Kim has emphasized all along, this is new territory for them in some ways. You know, we are very familiar with the kinds of transcripts that Charlotte-Mecklenburg has or independent schools have in this area, so we know what they look like. But colleges see such a myriad of transcripts. Some have grades, some do not have grades. Some send pass-fail, that's how they grade. Some send portfolios of subjective critiquing of kids' work. So on the plus side, college admissions officers are used to seeing a variety of grading options. So that's a plus in this situation. They also understand that this is new for everyone. This is not like you know, the Katrina or something that was a localized event that impacted schools in one area. So everyone's being impacted by this and having to adjust and adapt accordingly. You know, by and large, what I heard, and Rick Clark at Georgia Tech made some really good points. He said, you know, they're going to accept whatever is on the transcript because that's not their right to make it want to be different from what's on the transcript. That they would want some very clear explanations of how grades were handled. And as you said, Erica, that may have to come from the state level, sort of saying, okay, here's standard verbiage that can come through PowerSchool on transcripts. Certainly they would rely on school profiles and your counseling teams making those statements very open and clear to colleges. They would certainly not discriminate against any student. It's not going to have an impact on them as how they view a student's grades. The other question I asked was, okay, will that impact, it might not have an impact on admissions evaluations, because admissions evaluations by and large at most schools go beyond just grade point average and test scores, but what impact might it have on merit scholarship consideration, which could drill down a lot more into grades that might be focused on that. And he said, you know, it wouldn't have an impact on him in that regard at Georgia Tech, but on schools that were perhaps a bit more numerical in their assessment of applicants, there might be some impact there. So I think it's going to be a situation where, particularly for our current juniors who are a little more in that water than our 9th and 10th graders are, that they're going to have to do some good communicating with colleges and really be very mindful of colleges' statements on their websites or with connecting with the regional admissions reps to get a sense of that. I did find a piece that I shared with Kim and have it saved as a PDF of a listing of colleges. It's an assurance of college from a host of colleges as to how they would view grades that are listed as pass fail or grades that students may have opted to take as of a certain point in this second semester. And I'm sure that's something we could share.
Yeah, I'll share it with a follow-up after
Yeah,
this.
as a follow-up. So that's some of the input I've had, but they did reference again the profiles and the statements of clarity from college, from high schools.
Mhm. And as I've mentioned before too, I think the students have an opportunity as well, and their voice will be heard in this process in terms of their own experience, even because even though we have what's happening at the district and school level, what's happening in each individual student's life could be very different and impacting every one of them very differently too. So that's going to be something, a place that they're going to have an opportunity to share context as well. I spoke to Jared Rosenberg at the University of North Carolina, and he said very similar things to what you heard from Rick. They are going to take whatever they get. Again, he sees a lot of obviously transcripts from our district specifically, and he will be looking for the context. He will be looking for what were the options offered to students in CMS and what did they choose and how did they handle that. He's also, they're not swaying from what they always say. They are going to review each student individually, each student holistically. And this year, perhaps more than ever, with a little added layer of sympathy, just because we've all been impacted by something unprecedented. And so they're very aware, already having conversations to train their staff about how to work through this. And, again, it's like Phyllis already mentioned, this is not an isolated incident. We've had offices have to deal with, the outcomes of Katrina or Hurricane Sandy or other things that have impacted parts of the country, but this is impacting everyone. And so they're all very aware of what that looks like. I would also just say in general, I think that when I could talk to a couple of folks who tend to be a little bit more numerically driven, Clemson and Alabama in particular, they would prefer to see the grades. I mean, they're looking for a GPA, and certainly if they feel like a number can help that GPA for them at all, or for your student especially, they'd like to see that grade, because a GPA and a test score in their process, specifically those places that are very numbers based, that matters to them. And so, but they were very open to that. They will take what they get and they will manage and they will figure it out, because they know that not every student is even going to have the choice. Some students are going to be applying to them who only have the option of putting pass or withdraw or perhaps fail, like some districts are doing as well. So it just, they're going to make as a concerted effort to understand whatever is sent to them in any case.
Our regional rep from University of South Carolina said the same thing, that they would prefer to see grades, but they will take it. I did email her back and asked, okay, how will that impact merit scholarships, honors college consideration, because South Carolina is very transparent, particularly with non-resident scholarships, in saying, here are the GPA ranges, SAT ranges, and this is what you could expect to get. And on their application, when you put in your grade point average and your test scores, it'll pop up automatically. This qualifies you for consideration for the honors college. So I think it'll be an interesting dynamic to see how that goes. But I think too, I mean, what isn't going to change is that colleges are not evaluating students in competition with kids from other schools. It's all within the context of your public, independent, homeschooled, whatever the environment might be. A couple folks I talked with said that if they felt that there was some, and this is more for current juniors, some lessening of the instructional capacity for second semester, they might be looking at first semester grades a little bit more, but that's a maybe. So again, they're not sure, and they're not sure. With testing, I think it's interesting the number of colleges that have opted to go test optional just for next year for the current juniors, because they've been so compromised in being able to take tests. And yet some have said this was the impetus for us to go on and do this anyway. So I think that's going to be an interesting sidebar for 9th and 10th graders as to whether some of the schools that are going test optional just for next year find, we might continue this.
That's a good point. Yeah. A a question popped up in the chat about is the optional essay on the application a good place for students to talk about academic life during fourth quarter? And certainly that is. There's, you know, for parents who haven't yet gone through this process, the Common Application specifically has a space for additional information. There has been talk, I think I have said this on an earlier coffee, of the Common Application actually adding a section specifically to ask, how were you impacted during COVID-19? There's also been some talk about whether or not that would just be added as a complete essay question. So again, for every student and everybody's story, it's so personal that, you know, for some, they may choose, if it's an essay prompt, they may want to write a complete 500-word essay about it. Others would say, I'd be better off writing about something else and putting this in my additional information section. But certainly working closely with your counselor, your advisor, whoever's helping you work through your applications, you know, those of you who I'll be working with, we will talk about, you know, what is best for you to say, to share, you know, so that your story is told in light of all of this and makes good sense in the context of it all. Anything else from anybody? Final thoughts, or no more questions coming in? Erica, thank you again so much for being here. Phyllis, thank you for helping me with the research for colleges and all of that. For my attendees, thanks for hopping on the call today. I will be back every Tuesday through June to try to keep navigating all of the strange changes that keep happening for us in this process. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically just about well-being and kind of helping our students get through these next few crazy weeks, and even checking in on how they've been doing so far. And then of course, I'll just answer questions and provide some updates on anything else I learn. I can't keep up with the volume of emails, and I could probably be in a new webinar every hour of the day, but I have to manage that too, because I think I go on to sensory overload. So I'm sure some of you all are doing the same. Well, again, if there's no other final questions, then again, thanks to everyone. We will send a follow-up with the link to the document that Phyllis mentioned. I'll make sure to include that. And then we'll send the recording out to anybody who wanted to share that with anyone else, or anybody who couldn't attend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Erica.
You too, Phyllis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.